Hey there, welcome to One Take, powered by backers.
Right? No judging. No judging.
The millennials are really changing that.
Is charm. No.
All success begins with desire.
I feel like I'm on fire right now.
OMG, baby, tell them.
Hey there, welcome to One Take, powered by backers. I'm Justin Fox, joined here by Ian Lane from the Northern Ontario Angels. Ian, thank you very much for joining me.
Awesome. Thanks, Justin. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. I like the background there. I like the background so people know exactly what it is. So a quick intro. So Ian, you're the executive director of the Northern Ontario Angels, a diverse career in economic development, enjoy fostering connections between entrepreneurs and angel investors across Northern Ontario. Originally from Red Deer, Alberta, you've lived across Canada, where you have a unique view and lens on the innovation economy in Canada. You enjoy playing music, sports, and the odd sale. So welcome to the show, Ian.
Thanks,
Is
Justin.
there anything I left out there, or that was, obviously just a quick bio, quick intro.
I like that one. I feel like you send people ask for a short bio and it ends up going on for like 3 minutes. You're like, wow, that's the short one. So I actually really like the tweet or the X of who I am.
Yeah. The what, like, what's the limit now? 500 characters, or I think they bumped it at one point, right? From like 250 to 500. And
admittedly, I have not participated in that platform for a while.
Yeah, I actually built a business, I think, right from scratch using Twitter back in sort of the early, maybe not, sort of like 2012, 2013. I just used that. I started a 3-on-3 hockey league and I exclusively used Twitter. And I kind of used it a bit myself as well. But yeah, I have not been on Twitter since it's been X, and probably for about 2-3 years prior to that. So not a social media platform I use all that often.
Yeah, you and I are in the same boat there. You got to tell me about this 3-on-3 hockey league. Do you guys play on, or do your folks play on regular ice surface, or is it a smaller ice surface? How does that work?
Yeah, so it was a full ice surface. It's currently sort of on hold, if you will, sort of indefinitely. So the idea was so this is way back, sort of 2015, I guess, 2014, 2015. I saw the NHL's overtime, the 3-on-3, and I thought, sort of was with a buddy, and I was like, wow, this is unreal, sort of exciting, fast paced. I was like, what if there was a professional hockey league that played only 3-on-3? And I was like, what would we call it? I called it the 3HL, went and bought the domain. And about 2 years later, January 1st, 2017, we played our first event at the old Maple Leaf Gardens, now called Mattamy. Had about 1,000 fans there. We had 8 teams, 10 guys per team, representing sort of cities around Southern Ontario. It was like an 8-team kind of March Madness style bracket. You win, you move on, you lose, you're done. I think at the time we had 2 7-minute halves, because I just saw the rugby sevens and thought that was a cool format.
That's cool.
But eventually we evolved it to 3 5-minute periods. And we played. There was a cash purse, and then we played for about 2 years, every other weekend or so across Southern Ontario. We were in Oshawa, Guelph. We went up to Collingwood is probably the furthest north. Actually, we went up to Saugeen Shores, up by sort of like Saugeen, up by sort of Tobermory area, up that way somewhere. Owen Sound, we played in Owen Sound. We had about 40 guys that had played in the NHL, a couple cup winners. It was pretty intense. Most of the guys were in their sort of 20s, early 30s. So, they're still quite active and quite athletic. Yeah, quite good. It wasn't really like, it was meant to be like a real pro league, right? So, it was super exciting. The players loved it. I just couldn't, and that's actually how backers started. I couldn't figure out how to fund it. I was struggling to find, investors, or to get people to sort of see the vision of what it could be. A lot of people were like, oh, it's not, how are you going to compete with the NHL? How, it's this, it's that. And there was a lot of naysayers. But we'd get about anywhere from 500 to 1,000 people to an event. We probably had about 15 or 18 events across sort of 2017 into 2018. yeah, and it was pretty exciting. And then yeah, just kind of fizzled out a bit, and had to kind of regroup. And I've looked at starting it a few times over the past, then COVID hit, and
Yeah.
sort of that derailed any kind of thoughts of comebacks. But and now I moved out to Vancouver, so that
There you go.
also has kind of derailed a little bit of it as well. But
Yeah.
yeah, it was super exciting. And from a hockey fan perspective, being a fan, a lover of sports, as you said, you yourself are, I was kind of like, if I could own a team, amazing. Starting a league was like sort of
Pretty
like
cool.
a dream come true. And people said I was crazy, but when they saw the reality of it, it was pretty cool. So, and that's
Yeah.
kind of, it was the inspiration for backers, right? That was this concept of like community owned teams, kind of the Green Bay Packers, kind of crowd equity crowdfunding. That all came from the 3HL. And that was sort of, then I transitioned and launched backers, and sort of, with a vision of being able to go back and help the teams raise capital and launch it again, but
Yeah.
just hasn't really got to that point yet. We've had a couple false starts, but yeah.
Very cool. Very cool.
So if you know anyone that wants to help run a 3-on-3 professional hockey league, arguably across Canada, it was sort of, it's funny. I actually started it right around the time the Ice Cube started the Big Three, which is the basketball one.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it was sort of interesting. And it's interesting to see he's in the news right now, offering the girl from Iowa, Caitlin Clark.
Oh, yeah.
Caitlin Clark, he'd offered her
Yeah.
$5 million to play in the
Whoa.
Big Three, right? Which is, 10 times what she'll get in the WNBA.
WNBA.
So,
Oh, that's pretty cool.
So it's interesting. So
Yeah, very cool.
what kind of sports are you into? Hockey, I would assume, being from Ontario
hockey,
and Alberta?
hockey, tennis, and swimming are the big ones. The odd sail. My wife's from Prince Edward Island, so
Oh yeah, you were saying on offline there.
her family is a big sailing family, so that's a lot of fun. But yeah, I played a lot of hockey growing up, and the reason I asked about the 3-on-3 is there's a little rink here in Sudbury. Actually, Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl spend time up here because their significant others are from Sudbury.
Okay.
And so you can see them in the summertime, and they just enhance their skills. But it's a small, I don't know what the dimensions are, but it's a lot smaller than a regular ice surface. And when you go play there, you play 3-on-3, and it's a totally different game. So I understand when you're saying like that with folks that like how are you going to compete against the NHL? It's a different sport. Like you're not competing against the NHL.
Well, this is what I tried to explain to people. It's like a whole new sport, whole new opportunity.
It's like softball.
Right?
It's like softball and baseball. Yeah, you have a bat and a ball, but they're very different games. Maybe not the same, but you know what I mean? Like anyways, have a lot of fun with that. I get humbled every time I play with them because I'm used to playing on a regular surface, and I'm humbled on that surface as well too.
Do you get out and play with Connor McDavid?
God, no.
Okay. I was
I
gonna
wish.
say,
I am an Oilers fan. I'm a diehard Oilers fan, and it's just funny that he and Leon Draisaitl, you can see them on the tee sheet at one of the golf courses here in the summertime as guest with a certain group, and you're like, oh, it's McJesus. He's playing two groups ahead of me.
It's interesting. You're an Oilers fan. I mean, I grew up sort of in the 80s. So even though I'm from Toronto, kind of, gravitated towards the Oilers as the team to root for. Yeah.
They were a fun team for a long time, and then they weren't very good, and now they're fun again.
Yeah. There was definitely some interesting years. I think of the Dougie Waite, Jason Arnott kind of days. The book ended. Those were some interesting days. Funny enough, I had a I don't know if I should say this online, but anyways, had an ID that, let's just say, wasn't official when I was younger, and that was the street address was 7 Arnott Way.
No way.
Yeah.
Love it.
So that's
that's your McLovin.
Yeah. Exactly. That was my exactly. I had 7 Arnott Way. Anyways,
cool.
Yeah, that was when you could go pick them up down on Yonge Street in sort of the 90s. Anyways, I don't know anyone watching, whatever. I'm sure there's a lot of Canadians that had some non-official IDs to go do things on back in the day. So let's talk about Northern Ontario Angels. Obviously, you said you're from Red Deer, Alberta, and then you've moved now. Obviously, you're in Sudbury. Talk a little bit about Northern Ontario Angels. Maybe touch on what specifically an angel is, and then kind of what you guys do with Northern Ontario Angels, and kind of how you fit into the sort of startup ecosystem and sort of working with founders and early stage startups.
Yeah, amazing. So, I guess what an accredited investor is in Ontario, we have to meet the Ontario Security Commission definitions.
Right.
So it's a high net worth individual. It meets pretty much 4 criteria, and we pair investors with founders, entrepreneurs that are looking for that private capital. So high growth companies that are looking to scale, predominantly in the technology sector. But Northern Ontario is a pretty unique region, and it's a fun time to be in Northern Ontario. You hear the government, both levels of government at the provincial and federal level, talk about the critical minerals strategy. Well, that's Northern Ontario. The big investments that they've put into the battery electric vehicle revolution, all that stuff is coming out of our region. So we're playing in a really, really interesting time where we're in a boom cycle. Our communities are poised to do really well. But what's really interesting about that, it's mining. A lot of people think that mining is still pretty dirty. Go underground with a pickaxe and a light bulb on your helmet. But there's a lot of innovation in that sector as well too. And so we're seeing a lot of really cool deal flow in mining innovation. And our investors, many of them have acquired their wealth from the mining sector, and
Right.
so it's a nice pairing between those sectors. But I would say, in the communities that we're in, I'm based in Sudbury, but we also have a presence, in Thunder Bay, Sault Ste. Marie, Timmins, Parry Sound, Muskoka, North Bay, all the way to Kenora. It's a big region. It's about the size of Germany, but about a population of 800,000 people.
Right.
So it's pretty dispersed. We've got some other sectors that have emerged. We have some academic teaching hospitals, so some life sciences sectors that have done really well. So clinicians, accountants, lawyers, knowledge-based type of investors like to participate in some of those earlier risk investments. Health sciences, life sciences is difficult. It obviously takes a long time to go along the regulatory path, but
Right.
we're punching above our weight for some reason, and really proud of some of the companies that have emerged out of our region. But we're, if Canadians are, I would say probably quiet about their successes, Northern Ontarians are very, very,
Very
quiet.
quiet.
So we have to do some work to celebrate some of the successes we have. But we fit in one part in a fundraising continuum. We've got really awesome government agencies that have strong envelopes of funding for non-dilutive capital to help the companies get started.
Right.
Which is really, really appealing. I actually think it differentiates us from other parts of the country. And then, we've got strong regional innovation centers that are helping incubate, accelerate companies. And then a really cool investor network that, we have over 200 investors in our network, predominantly here. And I don't know if this is the same across the country, but there's a philanthropic and a community building drive to a lot of our investors. Our region's experienced out-migration, and so sometimes the investments into companies are like, well, I'm going to create jobs for current and future generations to, keep our business community and have meaningful employment opportunities for our current and future generations. And so there's a really nice feature amongst our investors that we're really proud of. So yeah, it's a cool job. We've got a really neat time to be a part of this organization with what's happening in our region, and I'm just the steward of it for now. Yeah.
So okay, so you mentioned about 200 investors in the network. Let's talk maybe a little bit about so obviously accredited, high net worth, so there's certain income aspects around, a couple 100,000 or I think 3 or so as a family, 1 million or 5 million, couple different benchmarks there, which those that aren't familiar with them can definitely look those up. But so definitely high net worth, accredited, sort of sophisticated investors, like you said, many of whom have made their money potentially from the industries that they're maybe looking to invest back into. So if it is, the mining, well, it's funny, actually, I've had a couple conversations with people out here, specifically about the Athabasca Basin and sort of uranium mines, and that is having a bit of a resurgence, and there's a lot going on there. What would specifically they be mining in Northern Ontario? What would be, you mentioned the EV batteries. What are we looking at? If that's uranium as well? No, that's
there is uranium nearby.
Lithium
actually, the lithium, cobalt, nickel,
Okay.
gold. And then, yeah, the lithium the mines are more in northwestern part of the province. They're
Right.
trying to get up online. Chromium is a large one. That's the Ring of Fire that you hear about all the time.
Okay.
I believe that's chromium. Yeah, actually, the uranium part of it's interesting because there's a community not far from Sudbury called Elliott Lake that was a big uranium deposit and mining community. And then they actually pivoted to becoming the mine shut down and they pivoted to become a retirement community. So they offered like beautiful homes for $30,000 in the late 90s, early 2000s, trying to attract people from other parts of the province up here, and it kind of worked. But
we drove through that. I mentioned that we did a bit of a road trip up to Sault Ste. Marie a couple of years ago, and went through Elliott Lake. You can see it almost looks like they've mined the side of the road, or I don't know if that's just where they blasted for the road. And then there's we stayed actually really cool little place called Snake River. No,
Serpent River.
Serpent River, exactly right there. There's a couple of cabins, nice little, and then they got the big Looney, I think it was somewhere right there as well.
The
a little bit south
Louis in Wawa.
Well, is it just a little bit south of there though, right? It's in a little town somewhere right there.
Yeah.
So I remember sort of in that Elliott Lake, and Elliott Lake was like a sleepy little town sort of thing, right? Yeah. Tucked away off the highway a bit too, right?
Yeah, a little bit tucked away, but yeah, they'd had a big uranium mine, and then they closed that down, and then they had a whole bunch of they had a pretty much a dormant town with a lot of places available. So they made it dirt cheap to people to incentivize them to stretch their dollar. And I think people late 90s, early 2000s actually did come up, and so it's an older adult village and in town, and but yeah, uranium was here, but not so much. I remember actually growing up out west, there was a town on the map in northern Saskatchewan called Uranium City, which my grandfather would say now is the only ghost town that keeps the lights on. But it's gone.
Okay, interesting. But so I mean, obviously you've got the mining in Northern Ontario. You mentioned the life sciences. That's kind of an interesting sector as well. So where you said there was some training, sort of medical facilities up there. What sort of, I assume like med school type affiliated or associated hospitals. Where are those located?
So Sudbury and Thunder Bay
Laurentian?
Laurentian University, undergraduate university, and then Lakehead University is the one in Thunder Bay. It's also kind of a smaller undergraduate university, but they were the two seats or the administrative seats of the Northern Ontario School of Medicine University.
Okay,
and it's a unique way to deliver medical education. Like they're all across Northern Ontario. There's like 90 communities that they're present in where their learners go through. But also in Thunder Bay and Sudbury, there's 2 academic teaching hospitals. So there's some research that's come out of those institutions, but the medical school and then it being attached to the universities have spawned off almost without any coordination, really. Some good companies that one just closed, I think it was 27 million Canadian in a Series B.
Okay.
Down in the States. Obviously valuations are tough right now, but this is a company called Flowsonics Medical based out of Sudbury that's developed a really small ultrasound patch to monitor blood flow. So they're selling units in California, Illinois, New England states, Florida. So they're starting to do their expansion, and they just did a really nice, like I said, Series B. And that's one success. We've got about half a dozen of them that are doing great.
Cool. So, okay, that's an interesting kind of segue into the current markets. And, I'd love to hear kind of your take on the startup investment world. Obviously, valuations I was at a talk maybe a year ago at this point, they were saying how they've seen like a 20 or 75% drop in valuation. So, whatever was worth maybe 20x is now worth 5x or sort of like roughly, right? What are you seeing as far as the economy, if you will, from maybe 3 years ago to now? Where do you sort of see it going in the next sort of 1, 2, 3 years? And what kind of valuations are you guys looking to potentially invest in as sort of a caveat to that part as well? Like what's the sweet spot for the Northern Ontario Angels?
Yeah, a couple questions. I think the valuation part of it, we're definitely feeling it as well too. So our portfolio companies, it's taken a lot longer to raise that capital.
Right.
The valuations gone down. Term sheets are hurting. You know, I've talked to a recent founder of a really strong company who had a term sheet offered to him, and it was just like
Bit of a slap in the face kind of thing.
yeah, you
Yeah.
know, and nothing you can do except for pass the time. And
Right.
and almost, I don't want to say there's no reasoning to it, but you know, it would have been different had they done this a year ago, 2 years ago. Their raise, and out of their control that they're in this position where they're doing a raise. They're a really great company. They've got really great partnerships and revenue, and yeah, the VCs just, they've got you.
Yeah.
So almost to the point where they're like, well, okay, well, let's trim things down, ride it out, wait till the evaluations go up, and we'll bootstrap it, and we'll just be really lean and mean, because the terms are so out of favor
Mhm.
that they're almost, that's the best route, right?
I use the term sharks can smell blood. That's kind of what
Yeah.
we say within ours. You know, they know you're struggling. They know you need the money.
Mhm.
They know you're, you know, and some companies can kind of, like you said, you know, sort of tighten the belt a little bit
Yep.
and maybe bootstrap it, but others are forced to take what they can get if they want to stay, you know,
Yep.
in business and relevant and keep moving forward, right? So
Yeah.
it can often be very, very difficult, which is kind of why, you know, we started Backers. Is it's kind of the concept of now everyone can invest. You're not reliant on just the small, you know, number of VCs or even
Yeah.
angels. Now it's literally the general population can invest in an early stage startup, right?
Yeah.
Which opens up the, you know, sort of the floodgates, hopefully. Obviously there's a lot of education that needs to be, even on the
Mhm.
angel side, I'm sure there's a lot of
Big time.
education that needs to be, you know, brought into, you know, what a good company is, what
Yeah.
they should be looking at, you know. I know you touched on the sort of the philanthropic side of things. We look at it almost as the community, you know, that investing in your community, you know. We're kind of actually coming up with a bit of a marketing promotional thing. It's like back a winner, back, you know, back your community, back, you know, back a business you care about, right? It's sort of like, you know, supporting that. It's more than just the dollars of the investment and that overall return. You want to also see, you know, greater goodness go to your community, right? That's sort of that. So let's talk a little bit about that part of the, you know, the investment side. Like, how do you guys educate, or what kind of, you know, sort of opportunities do you provide to kind of talk to and work with the angels within your network? Or like, how do you foster that kind of community? I don't know if that's, I don't know if that's the right question, or is there,
Hey,
yeah,
nothing's off limits.
No,
It's all
I
good.
was just wondering, like, how does that work, you know, within the Northern Ontario Angels sort of network and community, and the broader Angels network, you know, across Canada as a whole?
I think it's I don't think there's a silver bullet or one way to do it. It's dynamic. You know, even within our organization, like I mentioned, we're in 8 chapter communities across the region. Each community is different. It has its own features. It has its own advantages, its own challenges, if you will. And so it's not a one size fits all. One thing that I think has served us well, and this goes back to the previous dialogue around the valuation part of it, is selfishly, we've got 3 main stakeholders within our organizations. You have founders that have the compelling deal flow. You have investors that are writing the check. Then you have ecosystem partners that, you know, support around the non-dilutive part of it. So the founders that have the difficulty with the valuations that we talked about, they're coming back to us where they probably should, like for bridge financing, where, you know, there should be going on into maybe a Series A, but they need a little bit of runway to run it out. And so selfishly for me, it's really compelling to raise some capacity to attract new investors into the network, because they got really great deals being put in front of them.
The opportunities are huge,
because the environment's tough, right? And so, you know, bring a friend out to an event. So you're an investor, you've participated in a deal, you like how it's gone so far. Well, next time we do an event or a private pitch, you know, bring 2 of your friends out so they get exposure, they sign up. We're lucky we don't charge membership fees to our investors right now, and so we can do that type of a thing. And you know, so that's one way of building capacity, raising some awareness, and we do have that compelling deal flow. Just last week, we actually did like a fireside chat with two active angel investors called Investor Insights. It's a webinar series that we've deployed this year, so it was our second one, where we actually have we had two active the angels just dialoguing like we are right now, and talking about what motivates them. How do you get these things, more angels to come out to these events? How do you get them to write checks to become active investors?
Right.
And it was fun, and part of the drive around that, it's benign, so it's not a threatening environment. We select the investors because they're really open. A lot of our investors want pure anonymity. They don't want people to know that they're investors. So we pick those that are comfortable with their name being out there, and just have open dialogue around demystifying it, and understanding that, almost like that social investing part that you talked about. These are people that care about the community. Yeah, they've acquired the assets or the high net worth to be that defined investor, but they're people, and people investing in people. And so how do you open that up for others to participate in it? So that's a couple of ways that we've built it over time and done training. And so sometimes you weave in like a little bit of education, not too top heavy, of like, oh, hey, we're seeing a lot of safes right now. Do you like safes? This is the advantage of a safe. We like a lot of our investors like convertible debt, and then you get out of the way and let people talk, and maybe feed them, and just bring them together so that they can share ideas amongst themselves.
Yeah, it sort of sparks some interest there. Those, you just touched on a couple of different things: safes, obviously convertible notes, convertible debt. I've actually had a couple conversations about safes literally in the past 2 weeks, more than I've had in the past 2 years. So obviously it's more of a US type thing, but it's gaining popularity. So let me go back to, you mentioned a couple things there that I guess you asked those angels. I'd love to hear what were their thoughts on why or how do you get angels to participate. What were some of the thoughts that came out from those two from the fireside chat, or what was sort of that, how do they write checks, or what motivates them, kind of thing?
Yeah, it's, to not to oversimplify it. I think the two main themes, the first one, and it's first, second, third probably, is compelling deal flow.
Okay.
Like, you have good companies, you've got good companies. And, one of the things that one of the investors said was, one of the criteria he looks at is that he would invest in an A team with a B product at the pre-seed stage. Right. So looking at the team, looking at the people, looking at are these people going to navigate the quagmire, the landmines of entrepreneurship? But it is, at the end of the day, it's having good deal flow. And then I think the other part that came out of that conversation was building a peer network. So providing these environments, providing these situations where people can network and talk to existing investors and go, yeah, I'm an active investor. I've done 4 investments, and this is what I've learned. This is what I would impart upon you. And ultimately take the plunge. Like, not everything's going to be perfect. The perfect term sheet that doesn't exist for both parties. And so if you find something that you're like, I really, really like this, then do it. Jump in and do it. And a while ago, there's actually another great investor that I spoke with. Somebody had asked a question. We were in a round table in a physical place after we did a private pitch, and one of the newer investors said, "When am I going to get my money back?"
Right.
And the established investor said, "Don't ask that question.
Yeah.
Write the check and say goodbye." And this was life sciences, health tech companies, and that had pitched that night. And he's right. In many, like, don't worry about it. You don't log on to like you would your bank account or your investment account and look at it every week. Like, it's going to take 8 to 10 years. And trust the organization like Northern Ontario Angels, that we've done some good screening, we've done some good coaching with the companies. We feel like this is good. We're not making a recommendation. We're making an introduction. But don't ask those types of questions. Just write the check if you like it, and not hope for the best, but trust that the process has been ironed out.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. That's kind of, we're educating even less sophisticated. And I say that, not lightly, but not in a negative way, but people who have never had even that opportunity, typically from an angel perspective, to give $100, right? I don't know what would be the typical check size, let's say, of the angels that you would be
I'd say
writing typically.
Yeah, I'd say between 50 to 100.
50 to 100K.
Yeah, they're
right?
big. They're big.
Yeah, bigger checks. I mean, obviously your health science, life sciences, mining, huge expenditure. Like you said, time frames could be 8 to 10, maybe as much as 20 years, especially with like life sciences. You're looking at like trials and years of all kinds of I was going to say FDA or whatever,
and a shitty
equivalent, right?
Shitty regulatory environment and and a pretty difficult procurement environment too. Right,
exactly, right. So I mean, 8 to 10 is probably short on that side of things, but in a mining sector, 8 to 10. I mean, I was just talking to a guy about a deal out here, or the uranium deal, and they're 6 to 7 years till they probably, there's 2 years of this, 2 years of that, and before they even get to mining, like they're just exploratory, right? So it's like you're writing a check that the idea is that it sees a 10, 20, 50, 100x in that 10 years, right? But it's like people look at an RRSP and they'll just put money into it, right? Or some sort of like retirement plan, but they watch it too much. I know my parents are like, oh, what's this? Especially now in retirement, they're like, whatever. But just put it there and leave it. And in 10 years, when they exit and whatever happens, and you get your 10, 20, 50, 100x, that's when, that's the investment part of it, right? So it is very illiquid in that sense, which can be difficult for investors. Which is why you probably shouldn't be putting cash that you need access to into these types of investments. They're they are high risk with high reward potential, right? So what just to kind of go back to the other part there, the second part of that sort of first question I asked, you mentioned valuations are down. Where do you see, I mean, put on your your Nostradamus hat or whatever, where it's your magic crystal ball out, where do you see the next 3 to 5 years? Like, what do you see us at the bottom? Is there further? I mean, again, just your opinion. I don't know. What are your thoughts from an economic standpoint, from a business standpoint? You did mention wait a few years for some of these companies. Like, where do you see that? What are your thoughts?
It's interesting question, and as you're posing it, I don't have a business background. My background's in public administration, and so it's a little bit out of my comfort zone to make it. A little bit out of my comfort zone to make those predictions. I think the world is just so topsy-turvy. There's so many there's so many crazy things, like the SVB, Credit Suisse, on the backdrop of a global pandemic, now the geopolitical things. It's really difficult to predict. I think in a very concentrated period, we've dealt with a lot of unprecedented things in our time. In speaking to some seasoned investors and seasoned serial entrepreneurs, I think there's a feeling that there's obviously, like, the economy is doing pretty well, and the valuations are certainly in favor of the VCs and on the investor side of it. But I think it'll probably flatline in the next little bit and correct itself where there's a little bit more balance. I mean, that one example of the company that says, well, we're not going to take your offer. We're going to bootstrap.
So do they get, now, interesting question there, not to cut you off, but do they get a second offer? Like, in that context, what would the investor come back and say, okay, or would they counter? Like, what is that sort of conversation?
Yeah, interesting. I think there are negotiations.
Right.
We haven't really been a part of that. This example is a little bit more of a developed company that's gone to a larger VC. I don't know, to be honest with you. I don't know if they both entities entrench themselves or dig their heels in, and sorry, I don't have a firm answer for you, but it's a unique time for sure.
So that's an interesting.
I think where we're at you know, and we've got a couple of companies right now that have attracted some really great interest from investors where they're oversubscribed. I think
Okay.
our advice to companies are oversubscribe yourself so you get more runway so that you focus on your business so you're not fundraising all the time because the fundraising environment is so crazy. Like
Right.
if you're getting a lot of traction at this stage, you know, a seed or pre-seed, collect what you can, run with it, do what you can, and stretch it out as long as possible because the landscape is murky.
So okay, that's an interesting part there. What and I appreciate you obviously joining me here. So I've got a couple questions, but this one you just kind of brought up, and I think it's an interesting. So you mentioned obviously fundraising is a full-time job. Like for most founders, it's a, it's a heavy lifting, right?
Yeah.
What sort of tactics or strategies do you recommend to founders to kind of make that as effective as possible? Like, what are some of the like obviously you're bringing them into your network. What are some of the things that, if you're coaching up a founder, I'll throw it out. Like, what would be the top 3 things, if you want to kind of frame it a little bit, that you would say to a founder that they need to be doing while fundraising, I guess, if we want to kind of frame it as an easy to answer sort of top three piece of advice to
easy to answer. Oh God.
I don't know. I was just trying to frame it so it's not so open ended. But like, coaching a founder, what are a couple things maybe that you would think are strategies, tactics, things that they should implement to kind of improve obviously their chances of raising capital and how much they're raising, and you mentioned the oversubscribe. That's a good strategy, obviously bringing in more money maybe than you initially anticipated, but if they're favorable terms for you, then that makes sense, right? But what would be some ideas there?
Yeah, I think the other thing from a founder standpoint, and you probably hear this all the time, is really have strong financials in place. Like even if you're pre-revenue, like just make sure that your projections are really, really solid. There's solid methodology, solid research behind it, solid rationale. Yeah, that you're really projecting out after environmental research on other sectors and industries and stuff, because that's ultimately, or I guess that's the projecting part of it. Depending on what your company is, you have your IP or your product, whatever that the value of the company is. Just make sure that you can talk to an investor about, this is what our competitors are doing. This is where I found this. This is where we fit into it based on our business model, and have the whole pathology of the company to be able to support where you're going to go with it. And everything's a negotiation, but we had a company recently when I first started with them. Their minimum check size that they were going to take from an investor was $25,000. And I said, well, wait a sec, you're pretty close to getting some contracts from some strategic partners here, some strategic companies. That's then going to get you into a revenue stage, like up your minimum check size, so you manage your cap table really, really well. So you're not getting, the $25,000 checks in there, which those are good checks. Like if they're strategic investors, no problem. But make sure that you value yourself based on good evidence, based on where you are in your development and what market you're having, and be confident. I think the cap table thing, as I talk that out, is really, really important.
It's interesting you mentioned that
1,000 times.
What about the cap table with smaller investors do you find is sort of the difficulty there? Well,
I think it gets messy for the entrepreneur. So I think with the messy cap table, the company is probably probably an example of somebody that hasn't done that oversubscription, done that effective fundraising, where it means that they're chasing all the time, and where they're maybe not focusing on their business because they've had to get an investor from here, an investor from here, an investor from here, an investor from here. Your cap tables like this, maybe your business is neglected a little bit, so you haven't properly scaled, or your selling book hasn't properly matured because you're focused on other things. And so the cap table part of it, for a company that's starting out, make sure it's as clean as possible, because as you move along the fundraising continuum, if you have a messy cap table, it has less and less of appeal to as you're going to Series A, Series B. I mean, obviously Series B, it's going to be cap table is probably going to be cleaned up at that point. But you know what I'm saying? Like so it's that catch-22 around, finding strategic investors, or are you chasing money just to grow so you can live another day type of a thing? Look at your operations, look at your HR component, your development costs, all that stuff, and stretch your dollars as much as possible because you want to keep your cap table as clean as possible.
It's interesting you mentioned that. So, I mean, obviously with backers, they're using the startup crowdfunding exemption to raise capital from sort of the general public. So non-accredited and accredited can invest, and the cap is 2,500. So by that very definition, if you raise up, you can raise up to $1.5 million, in theory, 1,000 people at $1,000 is $1 million, right? So you would have 1,000 people on your cap table. I'm just wondering your thoughts, because I mean, I've heard that as a concern, and I this is my take. I'll throw my take out there is that, sure, 20 years ago, pre-email even, or 50 years ago, like physical share certs were like mailed to the each individual investor, and if you needed to have some sort of communication, it was a physical mail. Now with email and sort of the ability to just have an Excel spreadsheet, arguably, and I mean, we're tokenizing the cap table, so it'd just be literally tokens on the blockchain is sort of the end goal there. I mean, to communicate with that 1,000 investors is just hit send to 1,000 emails instead of hit send to 5, right? Like I just wonder, is the cap table, is that still going to be a concern longer term, do you think? Or is that still kind of like, yes, from a perspective of, if you want some strategic investors, maybe that come in, like you said before, know the industry, have been in the industry, can give you that guidance, mentorship, be a director, be sort of part of the business, but having your customer base as also investors and your clients and users, those are the 1,000 people. Is that still, do you see that still as sort of, if you phrase it in that way, or like sort of position it that way, does it still seem as arduous or as a, big of an issue, if you will?
Yeah. It's interesting. I don't think there's one answer for it. I think ultimately, and our role is to be coaches and advisors. You advise for the person, and ultimately the founders that are raising, they might have the comfort of going to multiple investors, and that could work for them. I don't. It's hard. I don't. I think some of the companies that we've looked at, and I think of it from almost like a fiduciary kind of a reporting standpoint. If you're a founder and you've got 1,000 people on your cap table, from a fiduciary standpoint, you have a responsibility to those 1,000 people.
Right.
That's a lot. That's and it's not to say obviously they're not all hands on into the, and so you have to balance that part of the structure of your company. And I suppose it depends on where you are, what type of company you are, and et cetera, et cetera. So I don't know. I think how you framed it is nice. I like that. I'm not opposed to it as Ian Lane. But I might advise our entrepreneurs a little bit differently, but they may be different than who you're seeing as well too. And I think so. I've been in this role for 2 years, and that's been a common theme, is just trying to clean your cap table up as much as possible. And like, we see opportunities that are, $1.5 million, and the minimum check size is $250,000.
Right. So bringing in six investors, basically.
And so that's going to triage out a whole bunch of our investors that go, holy shit, I love this idea, I want to participate in it. So we don't have an SPV available to us right now. We don't have a fund. We don't manage a fund. We facilitate connections between accredited investors and companies.
Right.
But I think it would be cool in that instance, where you could have an SPV, where you could have investors that really want to participate in it, and say they want to throw 25,000 in, and so they could, amongst their 10 of them, get that 250, so that they could play in it, right? that's how I've looked at the cap table part of it, from the deals that we've seen. You know, and I'm not sure what backers looks at with what they're raising with your clients, but how you presented it, you know, it makes sense. And ultimately, like I said, it depends on who's raising and their comfort level.
Yeah, so you mentioned SPV, special purpose vehicle, just people watching sort of, it's like a roll-up vehicle where you can have that company in essence has shareholders, then it's the one line item on the cap table for the company itself. And it's sort of meant to be basically an investment vehicle. Which is an interesting, I mean, definitely look down that path, you know, in our industry. There's some companies that do that. They look sort of to go that route. I look at it as almost like as much about a loyalty and sort of like you know, it's your customers, clients, users, fans, supporters. They're invested in the business, right? So, you know, it's as much about, hey, I not only do I buy their product or I bought their product, if you will, or I use their service, I'm also investing. You know, it's sort of the hair club for men. I'm not just a client kind of thing, right? You know, it's
well, like you said, the Green Bay Packers,
the Green Bay Packers, exactly, right? They've got 362,000 shareholders, right? That they've gone back to the well, you know, and you know, this is sort of probably SEC days, you know, that they were doing it, but yeah, it's really that community that supports that business, right? And so, and this is where, I mean, the cap table is in essence just a list of names on a spreadsheet, right? And then if you want to communicate with them, typically they're non-voting common shares. So, you know, you're not really day-to-day operationally having to deal with them. You know, they can follow you along on social media to get updates. And once a year you send them a report or whatever's, you know, maybe quarterly, almost like a publicly traded company. You can now have those 1,000 investors that you're communicating with because you want to communicate with them, right? It becomes a benefit to communicate what you're doing because they're the ones that are going to be like, hey, that's cool. They just did this. I'm going to tell my friends about it. Maybe they sell more product or, you know, whatever it is, right? So a lot of consumer products, definitely this would be more beneficial to, right? You know, that sort of B2C, you know, or B2B2C type companies. But you know, it really is that loyalty aspect, that community. You sort of mentioned that, you know, at the beginning, right? That philanthropic kind of community aspect to it as well, right? That brings in the investors. Yes, they put less money in just based on the regulatory, you know, sort of constraints, but at the same time, you could probably do 10 investments or 20 investments at 2,500, diversify your investments into, you know, a little more, you know, a few more companies. You almost become a mutual fund yourself, right? It's sort of like, I've got these 20 holdings, I put 50K in, right?
That's an interesting point around that too. Like as an intro into angel investing, like pretty de-risked opportunity at that lower amount. As you get into this world, you get you know, you spread your capital out a little bit more and you see how it works. That's to me, that seems really appealing as somebody that wants to start in this area. That would be a good way of doing it.
Yeah, I mean, diversification obviously is key, right? You know, so if you could put it into 20 companies, 2,500 bucks each, and now all of a sudden you've got 50K invested and you've got multiple sectors, multiple regions, you know, companies that, you know, companies that you're just kind of, you know, interested in. And it's a bit of a, you know, rather than, you know, 50 or 100K into one company. And if it fails, that's, you know, you've lost your, you know, it's sort of, I joked, it's kind of like, you know, I was thinking on the weekend, I was going to do a little commercial, like, obviously casinos are huge, sports betting's huge, right? It's like, I was joking, it was like the premise would be, you know, the distraught husband comes home, you know, he just lost his money at the, you know, at the track or at the casino or, you know, at March Madness or whatever, right? But it's like back a winner, right? Back a, you know, a small business, right?
Oh,
and
there you go. There's
where it goes, right? That was kind of, you know, that was kind of where that thought process came, right?
Cool.
It's still a little bit of gambling, but it's you know, a calculated risk, right? So
yeah, for sure.
anyways, well, Ian, I
Cool.
appreciate you joining me. Yeah, it's
Thank
really
you.
cool. You know, I'll be back in Ontario over the next little bit too. Maybe come up and visit in Northern Ontario there. Or we
Sounds
can
good.
or if you're ever out this way, come on out to, you said that you've got some people out in BC, so come
For
on
sure.
out.
If you
we
want to play
can-
some 3-on-3, come.
Yeah,
come to
yeah,
Sudbury, man.
yeah. Let's. You know what? Let's. Hey, do you want to be a team owner in the 3HL? We can get a Sudbury team. We didn't have Sudbury. We had.
We should.
We had. What was the? I guess the furthest north would have been Owen Sound. No, I don't think we had an Owen Sound team. Guelph.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but anyways, cool. So we'll
Yeah.
talk. We'll talk more
Cool.
offline. But
Beautiful.
anyways, Ian, again,
Thanks,
thank you
Justin.
very much for joining me. Everyone, this has been One Take, powered by Backers. I'm Justin Fox with Backers, Ian Lane from the Northern Ontario Angels. And I see your website. They can find you obviously on northernontarioangels.ca. And they
You
can
got
check you out, link up with you on LinkedIn. Do you have any events or anything coming up in the
Yeah,
near future?
we're in Timmins on April 26th.
Okay. Is it an event there or what?
It's an event, yeah, live event.
That's a Friday, right?
That'll be a Thursday.
Is
I
it a
probably
Thursday?
gave you the wrong day, which is not.
The
good
26th
of me.
is a Friday, I'm pretty sure. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's the 25th. I apologize.
25th. Okay.
April 25th.
I'm actually
in
flying on the
Timmins.
26th. So that's how I
You
know.
know.
Yeah. We're coming
Good.
back to Ontario. So,
Awesome.
but,
Well, safe travels, man.
yeah. Awesome. Thanks for joining me. And
Thank you.
everyone else, we'll see you again soon. Hey there. Welcome to One Take, powered by Backers. Right?
No judging.
Yeah.
No judging.
And the millennials are really changing that.
Is charm. No.
All success begins with desire.
I feel like I'm on fire right now.
OMG, baby.